Hey there, it's Lindsay with High Altitude Astrology, and I have another chart interpretation for you today. And I'm going to be reading the chart of Rachel Dolezal. And I am actually having a difficult time deciding how I really feel about this chart and this person's story, because it's very unique, and there's sort of two opposing perspectives that come along with it, and it's left me wondering. And as we get into the chart, you'll see more of what I'm talking about. I really do think that this person's story has a lot to do with them being somebody who is supposed to bring awareness to social issues and cause us to think about things in perhaps a new or different way. So, if you want to follow along, the birth information is November 12th, 1977 in Lincoln, Montana, and there's a birth time of 3:45 a.m. And a brief backstory: Rachel is a woman who recently has been in the spotlight because she has been accused of basically cultural appropriation, essentially, which is where you take on the identity of another culture. And in her instance, she's a white woman taking on the identity of the Black culture. And it may not be fair to use the word cultural appropriation, because actually I've seen her in interviews. Basically, she has a history of actually teaching Africana studies at a university in Washington. So she's very knowledgeable in the Africana history. And so she herself has a feeling about what cultural appropriation is, and she doesn't see herself as being that. Her story is that she grew up in a religious family that adopted four Black kids. One was from Haiti, two were from Africa, one was biracial. And she says she started to develop this appreciation for the Black culture, and basically over time, started pioneering for it through becoming the president of the NAACP in her community, and, like I said, teaching Africana studies at a university, and organizing Black Lives Matter rallies, and just really fighting for equality for Black people. And in that process, she also took on the look of an African American or a Black person. I don't think she says she's African American. I believe she says that she identifies as Black. And literally, like, the hair weaves and kind of making her skin a little bit darker so that she actually looked like she could have been at least biracial, and which she wasn't. And where it gets a little sticky is that people have been accusing her of essentially lying about her heritage or her genetic. Well, again, it gets sticky because, as she points out, basically everybody's genes relates back to Africa. So this is what her point is that we are, she feels she's transracial, that she identifies as Black, therefore that's who she is, just as somebody who is a transgender person may be a male who identifies as a female. And she's getting a lot of backlash in the Black community, although some Black people are embracing her perspective and basically saying that she's opening up a new dialogue about what it means to be Black. And people say, well, you haven't suffered, you don't come from the same heritage where there's been suffering of Black people, therefore you cannot identify with us, you know. But there, like I said, there are other Black people who I have watched interviews of her with, and basically some are saying, hey, she's doing great things for the community, that's great, you know, and others are saying, well, she's actually bringing up a new discussion about what is race. And basically she is saying we are all one human race, and that we have to ultimately get beyond any, I guess, identification with you know, with our ancestry or our heritage, or, you know, I'm not quite sure. I mean, because if we're all one human race, as somebody else pointed out, then why even try to identify as a Black, you know, person? Why not just, you know, be who you are, but perhaps help Black people in their, you know, path, trying to gain more freedoms and all of that stuff. So this is why I'm saying it's a complex situation, and I don't claim to know everything about her situation, and if you're interested in knowing more, you should do the research yourself. There's, you know, tons of videos online, and in fact, the reason I got interested in looking at her chart is because there is a Netflix video out right now called The Rachel Divide, because that was her name before she recently changed it to something else, which I can't remember. But The Rachel Divide is the name of the Netflix video, and you can watch that and kind of get a bigger perspective as to what her story is. So let's look at her chart. Let's start with her natal chart. And she is a Scorpio. She's a Scorpio at 19 degrees in the second house. And that alone tells you a lot. She's really somebody who's here to experience the energy of transformation. She has a strong drive. She has a lot of power, and she's going to really go through transformative processes in her life, or the experience of transformation in her life. She's a really strong energy. She's a really strong person. And what makes her even more interesting than just being a Scorpio is that Uranus is conjunct her sun at 12 degrees. So there's about a 7-degree orb between the two planets. But not only is she a powerful Scorpio energy who is here to go through transformation and to face things, you know, that's what Scorpio is all about. Ultimately, it is a process of facing our unconscious, facing what's in our sort of the deeper recesses of our selves that we don't always recognize or identify with, and to really transform those drives, those unconscious or compulsive drives within us. That's a lot about the Scorpio process. And learning how to really let go, you know, and not get in those battles of power and will, and learning how to transform. And that's what transformation is. It's really learning how to let go on an emotional level so that we can move on with our lives. But to have Uranus conjunct your sun makes her like an Aquarius. And Uranus is all about freedom and individuality, and it's about insight and interesting new perspective. And I wanted to read something from Cafe Astrology about people who have sun conjunct Uranus. And they write, it is natural for those born under the sun conjunct Uranus aspect to question tradition. These are individualists. They naturally rebel against that which is established. It doesn't mean that they consistently break all the rules, but they definitely do question some of the rules, especially those that simply don't make much sense to them. They possess much self-integrity. They prefer to answer to no one except themselves. They avoid labeling people and are most offended when others attempt to label or stereotype them. And finally, it says, although progressive, they can be maddeningly stubborn at times. So this is interesting because to me that speaks to this part of her that she is experiencing. You know, she's basically saying, hey, I have this perspective, and yeah, it's different from the traditional perspective, But listen, here it is. And boy, has she stuck to her guns when it talks about, being stubborn. I mean, not only is Uranus, which rules Aquarius, a fixed energy, but then her sun is in Scorpio, which is another fixed sign. So she's really got a lot of conviction. She really has a lot of passion. She's got a lot of, fixed energy when it comes to her self-expression, especially with that Uranus conjunct the sun. So a couple of other things. She is an incredible artist, and she went to school. I believe she got a master's degree in perhaps fine art. But in this movie on Netflix, The Rachel Divide, you can see some of her work, and she's definitely a incredible artist. And where I see that in her chart is that she's got the moon at 6 degrees Sagittarius conjunct Neptune at 14 degrees Sagittarius in the sign of Sag, of course, but also it trines, that conjunction trines her Mars in Leo. So first, let's just look at the moon Neptune. That's somebody who's really going to be in touch with the creative expression, because both the moon and Neptune are receptive energies, and they relate to our feelings, our emotional expression, which of course, when it comes to art, that is the connection that we're expressing from. It's our emotions, it's our feelings, it's our creative connection. So that's where I see some of her artistic expression coming in, is that moon-Neptune conjunction. And then in Sag, that has to do with, in general, Sagittarius energy is inspiring, and it's got a broad perspective, and it also wants to bring new perspective to others. So perhaps in that creative process, she's able to stimulate the perspective of others. And you can see that in some of her work that they show in the movie. I mean, she does a lot of work around the Black culture. And I guess when she applied to the school that she got her master's degree in, she did submit these African-American images of women and things like that. And this school was I think, majority population of Black people going to the school. So they actually thought that she was Black when she applied. She may have even, and again, I don't remember all the details, but she may have said she was white and Black on the application. But apparently they didn't know what she looked like, and they were actually surprised when she got there, because she actually looked white at that time, and they were assuming, I guess, that she was Black because of the message in her artwork. So that moon Neptune conjunction in Sag, and Mercury is close by the moon too, by the way, trines, and she's written 2 books already, I believe, trines her Mars in Leo. And Mars in Leo, this gives her this kind of, if you see her, I mean, there's a regalness to her, there's a regality, the way that she fights for herself, the way that she defends herself. It's very poised, it's very controlled, but she's definitely got that Mars and Leo energy going on there, I feel. And I think that Mars and Leo also is another expression of her creativity, because Leo likes to be seen. They're very, in some ways theatrical, but that's the Leo energy. They like to be noticed and like to be seen. So that's where Mars and Leo creative bent comes in, because they will put their energy into things that get them recognition. And again, that energy trines that moon-Neptune conjunction of her creative expression, with the Mercury nearby as well. And the last point I want to make about her natal chart is that she's got Jupiter right up at the top of her chart in Cancer. So Jupiter, again, it's how we expand out into the world, our philosophical perspective, but also the way that we want to help others see things. And it's in Cancer. And this is a sign of nurturing, of sharing our emotions. So really there's a part of her that it's almost like she wants to mother the world in a sense. And it's right up there on her 10th house of career. So Jupiter, of course, can be the teacher because we want to expand others' perspective. And that's exactly what she had been as a teacher at a university. But she's also perhaps a teacher, you know, about this issue that she's found herself in, or defending or teaching about or sharing with others. You know, she's really making people think in another way about race and about how people identify with their race. And I wanted to read something about having Jupiter at the top of your chart. This is from astroarena12.blogspot.com, and this person writes, planets on the midheaven represent the manner in which we should go about being authority figures. With Jupiter on the midheaven, you're meant to act as a sagacious teacher for all those who work under or alongside you. Your responsibility is to enlighten them using the philosophical style of your Jupiter sign to help them see the big picture meaning in everything that they do. Therefore, Jupiter in Cancer is considered to be a really wonderful position for the planet Jupiter, which represents the ways in which we can grow and the belief system we can create for ourselves in this lifetime. The knowledge takes place on a deeply intuitive level with Jupiter in Cancer. One of the reasons why this position might be considered beneficial is because of the good fortune that comes from following one's intuition. Then we're being intuitive, or when we're being intuitive, we just know things. So people with a Cancer Jupiter tend to experience a much more gut-felt knowledge, an inherent wisdom, if you will, and they grow as people once they learn to completely trust their instincts, believing that the answers they're searching for are already deep down inside of them. It talks about having emotional generosity, and you'll also see it if you watch the movie. She kind of took on this mothering role for her younger siblings, and actually one of them came to live with her when I believe maybe he was 8 or 16, I think it was. She got legal guardianship of him. And so, you know, she is in some ways like this nurturing mother figure to people in her life. Son. The last thing I want to say about her natal chart is that she has Sun squared Saturn in her chart. It's a wide square, but it is there. And her Saturn's at 29 degrees of Leo. Her Sun's at 19 degrees Scorpio, as I said before. And with Sun squared Saturn, I mean, this can be somebody where there can be issues with the father, because both the Sun and the Saturn indicate the father principle in astrology. So to have the Sun squaring our Saturn can just suggest that perhaps there were challenges with the father. It could also mean that somehow we didn't feel our own power. We didn't feel our own authority, which is what Saturn's all about. And we have to learn that over time in our life, how to really come into our own authority. It could also mean, you know, we don't feel good about ourselves. You know, we might feel like we're not worthy or we're not enough, and that we have to kind of prove ourselves and to the world over time. And it can really make somebody who works hard. And apparently she was very driven. I guess that Jupiter on the midheaven would be attributed to that, but also somebody with Sun Saturn, it's like they've got something to prove, and it makes them really work that much harder in their life. So let's go ahead and take a look at her transits and find out what's been going on in her chart. One thing that's I noticed is that transiting Uranus as it's leaving Aries is going to be conjuncting her Chiron in Taurus. And Chiron in Taurus, Chiron has to do with our wound. Taurus, to have your Chiron wound in Taurus, deals with a wound around financial security, around attachment to things, but also about attachment to ideals. And Martin Lass expresses it this way. He says, to have Chiron in Taurus, we have a tendency towards trying to grasp, hold on to, cling to, covet, and or hoard security, safety, abundance, and love, whether it is with respect to people, things, or core ideals. And that was the part that interested me. He says, basically, tendency towards trying to grasp, hold on to, cling, or to covet core ideals. And I just wonder, with Uranus, this energy of awakening, of new perspective, of shocking change, might do something to this ideal that she, has kind of attached herself to in some ways. From an elsa.com forum, somebody writes about this transit. All of us tend to play certain roles in life. Often these roles are something we do out of necessity. At the time of a Uranus-Chiron transit interchange, we may examine these roles and say to ourselves, is this really me? How authentic am I being to myself? My, quote, true self. So, who knows? Maybe she will continue down this path of really saying, yes, I identify as a Black person, but also perhaps this is a time where, maybe she might develop a new perspective around all of this. The other thing that's going on right now is that Saturn is moving through the bottom of her chart. Saturn is moving through Capricorn. It's around 9 degrees. It started in April of this year, and it will end in December of this year, moving back and forth across that lower part of her chart, Saturn across the nadir. And, Saturn deals with our work and creating foundation and building structure, but also eliminating that which is no longer serving us. So it's moving through her 4th house of home and family, her roots, where she comes from. And it's interesting. It may alienate her more from her family. I know I saw in an interview that she's basically told them she doesn't want to, talk to them right now, her biological parents. But it's also a time where, she will really be getting in touch with a truth about the deepest part of who she is. And Robert Hand writes about it in Planets in Transit, and this is what he says about it. He writes, this is an extremely important transit, a time where you will focus on your innermost personal and domestic life, for this is the area that requires work. Any problems in your domestic life will become more critical, and anything you've been, quote, putting up with but not really handling will have to be dealt with. Consequently, the effects of this transit range from a simple reorganization of your domestic environment to a total reshuffling of the personal relationships and contacts that affect your domestic life. And she's also transiting Jupiter conjunct her Sun, and this is something that happens every 12 years, so it's somewhat rare. And generally, it's a time of growth and new perspective and opportunity for her. This started in January of 2018 and it'll complete in September of 2018. So this would perhaps be considered more kind of a lucky time for her, where again, just opportunity comes, growth comes for her. And really the energy of this teacher, the energy of expanding consciousness, of expanding perspective is blending with how she shines out into the world. So it's really an interesting time that the movie's coming out right now, and it's shining a light on her perspective because it's stimulating this teacher part of her, being somebody who brings a message to others. And finally, she's having her Sun, by progression, move into the sign of Capricorn. And again, she has a Scorpio Sun, so this is the first time that her Sun is now moving into Capricorn by progression. And that's just a shift. Whenever our sun progresses into a new sign, it's like we're moving into a time where we're going to be expressing more of that particular energy through our solar energy. So that deals with being more of an authority. It deals with expressing ourselves through our work, through business, and just more of kind of somebody who is an authority for themselves. So it'll be interesting again to see how her story continues to unfold as she's moving into this new progression in her life. So this has been my chart interpretation for Rachel Dolezal. Thank you so much for watching. If you like my channel, please subscribe. I can also be reached for readings at info@highaltitudeastrology.com. Thanks so much. Adios.